So some people are still working toward their law degrees and probably experiencing a lot of stress. According to a report by Barnes & Noble College Insights, Gen Z is suffering from more stress in school than any other group before them. Well, you have a Gen Zer. Tell us about it.
Yes, I do. I think it's incredibly stressful. I actually have my stepson is a college student, and I don't know, is my 12-year-old Gen Z?
Yeah, he's Gen Z.
Yes, he's Gen Z.
He's almost Generation
He's not
Alpha,
stressed
though.
out yet, though.
He's living it
The
out.
12-year-old is
Being 12,
enjoying
living his best 12-year-old life.
absolutely blowing off the summer reading while mom goes to work.
But leave him alone.
Yes, but I've actually done, going to our topic, I've actually done Headspace with him. They have Headspace is a mindfulness app, and they have a kids section, and so he has done that. He's not embracing it as much as I am yet, but maybe we're going to get there.
He's not mindful about his mindfulness?
Not quite yet, but the one at NYU actually, he does take this stuff very seriously. He's very into being healthy and being in the right mindset, and so I'm really proud of him. He's teaching me a lot. So, but maybe I'll go home and teach him something more after this segment, right?
Yeah, sounds good. Our next guest wants to help everyone go back to school prepare for the stress by using mindfulness. Get that.
His new book is titled Beyond the Content: Mindfulness as a Test Prep Advantage. Don't we all need that? Let's welcome Logan Thompson. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us about your book. Tell us, we can't wait to talk to you.
You gave it a great intro. So the book was born out of, I'm a test prep teacher, so I teach several standardized tests. And
which ones?
I teach GRE, GMAT, and I've taught SAT, ACT. This is applicable to all standardized tests at really any age. And what I found is that so many teachers and students really just focus on the content of the test, which at first would make sense. You want to learn the content because you're tested on the content, but so often a student will know the content but not perform well. So this book is about the other half of test prep, the thoughts and emotional landscape that happen that coincide with the content.
So you teach an Introduction to Mindfulness course. Tell us about that. What do students learn in that course?
Students learn, and there's a framework in the book called Passengers and Drivers. So I give frameworks for us to name these thoughts and emotions that happen in us all the time. So in the course, students really get they learn techniques to be able to identify their own passengers in their mind, their own mental and emotional themes that start to happen, and that gives them insight into their automated patterns, and sometimes not so helpful automated patterns.
Like what? What kind of things do you see?
The most common passengers or non-helpful automated patterns in performance scenarios are generally voices that say, I'm not good enough. Or if I miss this problem, I'm going to miss the next problem. Then I'll miss the next one and not get into school. Or I'm an imposter. So I've outlined all of these various passengers and various ways for people to work with them, but mindfulness is key because if people don't identify that they're there, they just take instructions from these voices that say, you're not good enough. You're not as good as this person. You're not as good as that person. And they think that's the truth rather than being able to use mindfulness and say, oh, there's a voice that's telling me I'm not good enough. That may or may not be true. Wow. That separation's really, really key.
Go ahead.
It goes to there's a lot of people that think they're very bad at just taking tests, and then they become bad at taking tests. They'll do very well in the practice test, and then they actually sit down for whether it's the SAT or the GRE, and they just freeze. And as you mentioned, all the information just goes out the door. And then other people are just very good at tests, even if they're not that great with the material. They just can think the way that the test writers think, and they'll actually do better than they should, based on how they do in terms of the other academic tests that they go through. How do you solve for that?
I think I'm so glad you brought it up. It's one of the most common problems I see with students, and I would just call it a misidentification of what's happening. So with the information available, a student will perform well on practice and then not do well on the test, and because no one's telling them any different, their only logical conclusion is, I'm a bad test taker. But they're obviously not, because they took a practice test 3 days earlier and got a great score. So they're not a bad test taker. In fact, it has nothing to do with the content. It's this whole other half of test taking. It has nothing to do with the actual test or test writers. It's what happens in their mental and emotional landscape during performance. And this is why it's transferable to more than just tests. But they're not a bad test taker. So this book is basically permission to shed that label and look at what's actually happening in the moment, which is likely not due to content.
I think you need to translate that book into Korean and Chinese, because over there they're notorious for the test, ultimately determining their whole lives. I'm lucky to have been born an American, because I would never be sitting in this chair if I grew up in East Asia, because I am not a great test taker. And it has nothing to do with what you're saying. I don't have any of those passengers, but I do just have trouble with numbers.
Yeah,
so it's separate.
You're right. There's a parallel. There's content, and there's the other half. They both have to be.
It's very psychological. You're gonna laugh, but I love bubble tests. When I was little, I really enjoyed taking those tests. I'm probably the only.
Well, that's why you went to an Ivy League undergrad.
I did. Oh, Mr. Harvard. He went to Harvard, by the way. Yeah. So I did go to Ivy League school, and the truth is, my SAT was better, relatively speaking, than my grades. And
you're one of those.
No, but it's the strangest thing. But I don't know, because but a lot of it is psychological, because I actually always enjoyed, there's something about the bubbles, and I just got the way that the test takers.
Bubbles.
Yeah, but it's so much, but I had more confidence on that, and then I didn't have it when it came to it, like the just general writing an essay or whatever it might be.
Oh no, I got that on lockdown.
Right, exactly. So it's a flip side, and even just passing the CFP exam, which was a year and a half ago, that test, in theory, I should not have passed, but I hate to say I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy the test, but I did understand. No, but I understood the psychology. It was like a game. It was like a game thing where I understood the thinking behind the questions. So I was thinking like the person that wrote the questions, and it was psychological, maybe even more than the actual knowledge. I was like, what would a person writing a test want the answer to be, not what is the answer? Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot to be said for this psychology and the mindset of this.
Yeah.
And how young do you teach this mindfulness stuff to? Because, Bobby has a 12-year-old and he's already learning it. Is it appropriate to teach it to a preschooler? Like, when do you start the kids on this type of thinking?
Sure. So mindfulness as a concept really has no age limit, but just as anything else, like math doesn't have an age limit, but there are iterations of how complex you want to get. And this book, I would say 15 to 100. Like, there's no upper limit. This would apply to, I teach this largely to GMAT students.
We take tests throughout life. I mean, I said, I took a test a year and a half ago.
I'm done.
So I'm never going to say, I don't know when I'll be done. You don't know what life will hold.
God,
you don't know your next
not
career.
Anymore. No.
Well, I took a big test. And again, it was a lot of mindfulness to get through that test. So, but this book you could read as an adult, and then you could still kind of pull lessons out to teach a younger child from the book.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the most crucial thing that the book teaches is our ability to notice thoughts and emotions when they arise, and not necessarily take them as truth. For example, a voice that says, this is happening right now, let's go meta, let's go real time. You're not sounding smart enough. You're not being entertaining enough. Not you. These are my voices talking to me.
David has a lot of confidence.
You're talking the voice is talking to me.
He says misconfidence over here. Come on.
And before practicing, it would just be truth. I would have this idea, I heard it in my mind, so therefore it must be true. But now I can say, there's just a habit telling me I'm not good enough.
Right.
And I don't have to necessarily believe it. So that technique is valuable throughout life, whether you're an executive, a CEO, or a 15-year-old prepping for your SAT.
Just being able to flag it, acknowledge it, and then
What's one trick for test taking that you can share with us before you leave?
For test taking, I'd say the first thing is to notice that the thoughts that don't feel good, that are trying to dissuade you, are normal. Everyone else is having them too. You're not alone. Mm-hmm. And B, aren't necessarily true. They're automated, habitual thoughts that are brought from past experiences. So you can notice them and acknowledge them, and sometimes just naming them is enough to let them dissipate. Now, sometimes it takes further work, and there are exercises in the book about that. But very first, you're not alone. Everyone else has these thoughts, and they're not necessarily true.
Wise words.
Logan, great advice. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.
So, really interesting. I am a lousy test taker.
I'm okay with tests.
Isn't that funny?
My grades were never great.
No, my grades were stellar.
Were not great,
grades
actually.
were stellar.
I got some C's in high school.
C's.
I did. I was constantly getting extra help. I was an okay bio.
Oh, well, that's understandable. That is just,
really hard.
I'm the flunky in my family because I'm the only non-doctor.
There you go. Yeah, so
bio, oof.
Bio was really hard. But yeah, I mean, even I got a lot of B's. I was not the best student for grades, but I don't know. I sort of understand how the tests are put together somehow.